Oops. Welcome, welcome. We're so happy you're here with us. We are going to start our event today with wonderful colleagues in our community. And here we go. So, this month of April 2026, we are so thrilled to have our esteemed colleagues present to us creating brave spaces. I am personally really excited about this topic. We introduced this topic way back in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, and it is wonderful to see how much it has evolved. And here we are. Next month, our webinar in May is going to be the event of our annual COIL Ambassador Celebration. These are instructors from all of our community member campuses who have done so much in the world with their COIL projects, research, all that they do, and we love to celebrate them. We have a YouTube channel where this webinar will be posted, so always be on the lookout for that. And we have our workshop starting actually today, our Elements and Coordinator workshop. And then June, we have lots of spots available. Please consider registering. You can go to our website, coil.suny.edu. I'll put this in the chat as well. Um, this these workshops are really fun because it brings in people from all over the world. So if you were thinking about a workshop, please join us. Um, the model of COIL, this is the basics. Y- y- this has changed some for some places, but in the bottom line, it's always a project within a course. It doesn't have to be a whole course. And it also doesn't have to take over your whole semester or however you are doing your COIL collaboration. And we really like to promote a whole variety of approaches to doing COIL at this point, not just having it be the standard within a regular semester or quarter. And we have a lot of institutions around the world that we work with and are thrilled that are part of doing this work together. As I mentioned, our ambassador program. And if you do go to our website, you can click on any of the wonderful ambassadors. If you click on their picture, you can see the projects that they've worked on. So that's always fun. And if you have people on your campus that don't know what COIL is, please consider sending them this link. It has a self-paced introduction to COIL, the concept, the pedagogy. It has a couple videos of students, why it's important to them and why it's important to professors. And our community is full of lots of wonderful things that you can do with us, including webinars like today, which we're so excited to present to all of you. And also, we do, as I said before, professional development. And our workshops look like this. They're in Padlet. And our Elements course, which is running right now in April, really is all about learning the pedagogy and understanding what happens online and synchronous versus asynchronous, how to make compelling activities, and then designing a collaboration together. So, um, and also if you are a coordinator, we do offer workshops where you learn how to support locally on your campus as well as how to connect internationally to find partners and to build your COIL program. So remember, next community webinar will be our ambassador celebration. And now let's get into what we're doing today. And we're so welcome. We're so honored to have this group to present with us today. So I am going to hand over the reins to, actually, I'll go back to this one, to our group, um, faculty as COIL facilitators, creating brave spaces. And over to all of you.
Well,
Thank you.
hello. I don't know. Go ahead. I'm not sure. I don't think we prepped for this part. Do we say who we are and hello? Is that what you would like us to do? Okay, thank you.
Sure,
I'm
that would
going
be
to
great.
turn it over to you, Sarah, because you're the top of the list.
Great. I think it's alphabetical. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I am Sarah Dietrich. I'm in Southeast Missouri State University, which is about 2 hours south of St. Louis. And I've been doing COIL in one way or another probably since 2014, projects with Afghanistan, with Ukraine, El Salvador, Mexico, and what I do is, but I'm not, well, in addition to my COIL, I work with future teachers of English to speakers of other languages. So I'm in the Masters and TESOL program and teach some undergraduate courses too.
And hi, everybody. My name is Betsy Eudey. I am a COIL Coordinator and Professor of Gender Studies at California State University Stanislaus, which is in the state of California on the west coast of the United States. I've been doing COIL since 2020 or so. So I'm one of the newer ones to this and been really enjoying it and really grateful to be working with this wonderful group of women as co-presenters. So I'll turn it over to Mona.
Yes, hi, and thank you so much. It has been a real experience. So Mona Pearl, I'm faculty at Wilkes University in Pennsylvania. And my main focus is teaching business and doing COIL, which I started in about 2014, in the business world, which is quite interesting. I research a lot and publish, and COIL has brought a whole new meaning to teaching. Let's put it this way. Okay, so let's move on to
Okay.
our, yeah. So are you
All right.
there?
Yep, I am.
Hi, I would like to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Dawn Wooten. I was the last person on the previous slide because I have the W, but it also stands for winner. So I'm going to take that today. Um, and I have been a facilitator for numerous virtual exchange programs, largely funded by the US State Department. So I have done work with World Learning, SOLIA. I'm currently working on a youth State Department funded program right now. I'm also an instructor for leadership at Northwestern University and currently a fellow with UC Berkeley's Bridging Differences through the Greater Good Science Center. And this fall, I will be a Peace Scholar Fellow with Rotary in the MENA region. So I'm really excited about living in Istanbul for a little while I'm doing research on youth in virtual spaces. So here we go. So I'm Dawn, but I'm also a little nervous. And our agenda today, well, we're going to look at all of these amazing things. I won't read them out to you because I'm sure that you already figured it out. Next slide, please. Quick poll. All right. I would love to know, how do you feel about talking and being vulnerable, facilitating sensitive discussions? In the chat, put your number. We'd like to just get an overview. And we don't expect anyone to be an expert on this. We are still learning constantly. Oh, I love the people who put the 0.5. Those are my people. Okay, I'm never 100%. Wonderful. Oh, great. We're so happy to talk to you. We see a lot of people are comfortable But here to learn, and we love that. Next slide. Oh, next slide, Miss Hope. Thank you. So, why does emotional safety matter? Well, here is an amazing quote that my colleague Betsy, she has provided us with so many wonderful research materials, and this was one of those materials that she found. And we wanted to share it with you, and you will have a copy of all these slides so you can go back and read this thoroughly. But one of the things that I pulled out of this that I feel is the most important is that emotional safety starts with us. It starts with those of us that are the faculty, the instructor, the facilitator, because we have to be willing to be somewhat vulnerable as well too to role model it for our students and participants. Next slide.
Powerful quote.
I know Betsy finds all the good stuff, I tell you. And so the value of intellectual safety, this is another very something else that Betsy found from scholar Dawn E. Schrader, who coincidentally is another Dawn in the world. But I really like how Dr. Schrader frames this and talks about like the moral climate that we as instructors have somewhat of a responsibility to create. Because if we're not creating that space where our participants and students can show up as themselves, we're never going to move from that polite level of discussion into that deeper, braver, more curious level of discussion. Next slide, please. And this was another great slide that where Betsy aligned a lot of like sort of the common safe space rules. Many of us, we generate, you know, sort of whatever you call them in your class. It could be like community engagement rules or just things that we're going to uphold with each other. But, and some of those, they're just very kind of surface level, agree to disagree. But really, what we should be doing is reframing that and digging a little bit deeper and really exploring what do we mean by agree to disagree. And that statement could look something like controversy with civility. And then explain what we mean by that. Because it's not just a small 3 or 4 words where our young people are figuring out for themselves, what does she mean? What did we say about agree to disagree? We're actually spelling it out a little bit more. So it's something they can consistently refer to and also uphold for each other. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to my amazing Betsy. If you would please take over from here.
Thanks, Dawn. Really appreciate it. And I do want to note that we have created a Padlet on which we've included, seeming to be unstable. Let me stop my video. We created a Padlet in which we've included a lot of resources that include the session slides, but also a bibliographic resource and some other items that we'll address later in the session. And all of the sources that Dawn just mentioned and these next ones are all included in that bibliography in case you want to look at some of those more deeply. And so I've just put that Padlet link into the chat, but it's also part of the slide deck. So just want to note that many traditions outside of especially white Western frameworks offer really powerful ways of thinking about relational safety and respect that can be considered alongside and against concepts of safe and brave spaces. Often there's a lot of publications around certain things that show up in US-based, Western-based documents that tend to be applied to other locations where maybe they don't fit. And so we just wanted to draw attention to some similar supporting, contradicting ways of thinking about these learning spaces that may be helpful as we're engaging in cross-national, cross-cultural kinds of places. So the the first one we want to talk about is the concept of ethical space that comes from Cree scholar Willie Ermine, who invites us to imagine a
Oopsie.
meeting ground between different thought worlds. Uh, for
Whoopsie.
example, that's all right. So different thought worlds, for example, indigenous and Western knowledge systems. It's a space grounded in shared values like respect, humility, and responsibility. Ethical space acknowledges the existence of bias and conflict, but it's rooted in the willingness to listen across difference and to create and restore power balance as conflict and disagreements are addressed. And so this listen across difference is certainly a value that we hold in COIL, and maybe the ethical space may be a different kind of way of framing brave or space. Similarly, the Filipino psychological concept of kapwa, meaning shared identity, is about recognizing our interconnectedness. And kapwa invites us to treat one another as fellow human beings, kapwa tao, insiders and outsiders alike, simultaneously. And it's not about maintaining politeness or smooth relations, but it's honoring the human dignity of others in our interactions. And so these frameworks remind us that intercultural learning is not only intellectual, it's ethical and relational. And the next slide, please. Many of us have started learning more about Ubuntu or Ubuntu Gaji. And it's an African philosophy often summarized as I am because we are. And it offers just another lens of thinking about relations within classrooms. Wagid's concept of Ubuntu Gaji, a pedagogy of Ubuntu, emphasizes care and interdependence among teachers and students. And he notes that through Ubuntu caring, interdependence is always accentuated, no matter how diverse or provocative or uncomfortable the deliberations may become, that all remain engaged through care for one another, even in moments of deep disagreement. And you could switch to the next slide as well. Wagid also writes that when people engage openly with one another's cultural, political, or social concerns, their actions reflect active communal engagement, which is certainly what we're looking for in COIL. So teachers and students, he suggests, become prepared to act as publicly informed citizens who can engage with complex global challenges. He adds that showing dignity and respect for others' points of view creates the conditions for peaceful living and human flourishing. Through Ubuntu, teaching and learning become collective acts, a way of rehumanizing education, which aligns beautifully with the goals of virtual exchange. So next slide, we want to summarize that we must include but move beyond safety to embrace bravery and risk-taking. We must continually foster spaces where diverse knowledge systems and perspectives are honored. We must center relational responsibility, dignity, and care as the foundation for learning. And we must position learning as both personally transformative and socially responsible. And finally, these conditions don't just happen. They must be intentionally designed, facilitated, and assessed. Instructor presence is essential, but brave and ethical spaces require co-responsibility from everyone, teachers and students alike. And just noting that when we look at some of the goals and outcomes of virtual exchange, cultural humility, personal humility, intercultural communication, global competence, even career readiness, that all of these connect so well into this broader sense of how we create a school campus community. So I will turn it over to Mona now.
So now thank you. We're now going to move to the hands-on practice. So how do we integrate all of these concepts and components into what I usually call is virtual exchange, because it's kind of the umbrella for everything for COIL and telecollaboration and everything else. So if we could move to the next slides. Next slide, please. So let me begin with something very simple, basically acknowledging that virtual exchange is not something that we can simply drop students into and expect them to work in an automatic way. It's not a plug and play. It's not about technology knowledge. It's not only about technology. It is closely linked to the course and the discipline, the emphasis. And, a little bit of a plug-in. There's a promotion. There's going to be a book coming out, which is the handbook of using virtual exchange across disciplines, edited by Kelly DeZumis, that basically focuses on how virtual exchange around the world by discipline integrate all of these concepts into an experience. So basically, we need to prime students in a cognitive way. We need to activate their knowledge. They need to feel that they activate their knowledge, to set their expectations and frame the experience. So students can help. Basically, they need the help to understand not only what they are doing, but why they are doing it. What is the context? And this is why the discipline, basically having it within the course, so they understand, why am I studying this? I'm taking a business class, so why do I need to know about empathy? Okay, and I'm talking from experience. Okay, so in other words, they need both the cognitive framing and the emotional anchoring for all of that. So, for example, it is not about cross-cultural understanding as a standalone. It is about cross-cultural practice in their discipline. So I gave the example of business. It could be when students learn about sustainability, when students learn about the environment, and so on. So this preparation is important for creating the overall frame, and also talking about ethics, about ethical dilemmas. I'm using AI in my courses, okay? Meaning teaching students to use it properly. So, for example, they struggle with AI when they work with partners because the ethics are different. How we use AI, when we use AI, we have the plagiarism. How is plagiarism being accepted or not accepted? So basically, another major benefit that it basically encourages their metacognition. It encourages the way they look at things, they understand, and they begin thinking not just about the topic. Okay, it's a much deeper process. They start thinking about how they think, why they think, and that has to do with the interactions, how they respond to the other, and how they approach the teamwork. So once we understand the cognitive and emotional foundations and the interplay between them, the next question is, which will be in the next slide, is how do we design for depth and inclusion? Okay, so if we could move to the next slide.
I did. Can you not see it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it now. Apparently, we have a delay a little bit. Sorry about that. So basically, for virtual exchange to be meaningful, students need, as I said, a clear disciplinary learning objectives from the start. They need to know what they're doing, why they are doing, and obviously, we need to guide them how to do that. So link teaching objectives to learning outcomes, and in the context of the course. So I do it before we start, during, and as a recap. So basically, why did we do it? Why are we using virtual exchange? How are you going to use it in your interview, in your job, on your LinkedIn profile, all the skills that you're learning. So being clear matters. Clarity from our side, transfer to the students, is extremely important. Okay, and another key part is the contextual scaffolding. Students need the background information. Again, it goes back to understanding who they are, what they're teaching, why are we teaching it, and the understanding of the roles they may be taking on. Because in teams, at least in my courses, it's all about teamwork. So they would need to have an emerging leader, which we don't know. Somebody will have to take charge as to who's doing what and so on. Not to mention the whole idea of building trust. Trust is something very vague. How do you trust? Okay. And on the other hand, the warm-up activities, the icebreakers, the short introductions, in some cases, the storytelling. How do we structure everything? And as Betsy said, in an intentional way. This is not something we just dump the students into. So finally, it has to be student-centered. It's not enough to say the activity is engaging. They need to be engaged. They need to feel they're engaging. Okay. They need to feel they have the support, they have the structure, they know what they're doing and why. So let's move to the next slide and see what happens from orientation to engagement. So what type of discussions are we having here? So not all the discussions are the same and not all same and not all serve the same purpose. Some are meant to help students to get comfortable, the icebreaker. Some of them meant to build trust and then ease into the experience. And others are more content focused. Okay, now we start linking the emotional context with the cognitive context. Content focused and ask students to compare perspectives, apply certain concepts, and analyze issues. And later discussions can move into deeper reflection, interdisciplinary problem solving, ethical issues, and so on. So it's important why these discussions are basically also a core, our preparation and later on. So let's move to the next slide. And we're going to discuss why these discussions are important. So again, what really matters, the intentional design. We can't just expect students to understand what is the agenda behind virtual exchange or COIL or whatever. So we move the students from linking theory to practice. We help them reduce anxiety. They're very anxious. My students, at least in Wilkes University, that may be the first and only time that they engage with people, human beings from another culture. Okay, so this is really, it causes anxiety. And we move them from that stage to equity and to the retention of the experience, learning by doing. So if we move to the next slide, we are going to see how we actually prepare them. Okay, it's actually the next slide, I think, or maybe it's just my system that's in a major delay today. So
do you want to be on the slide that says from orientation to engagement, or
I want to be on the career.
The career?
Okay. So apparently we have a different version. Okay. Either way, I can talk about it. Okay. So basically, we have a slide that basically talks about the career preparedness. That one of the strongest arguments for virtual exchange is preparing students for praxis. Okay, preparing them to what their job is going to be asking for them. So today's workplace is actually, it's increasingly global. Okay, it's very digital and it's about collaboration. So employers want people who can communicate.
Slide 32, Hope. Slide 32. That's
Okay.
where Mona is. I'm sorry to
Okay.
interrupt, Mona. There we go. Now
fine.
we're on the same place.
So these are some of basically the skills. So Wilkes University had 7 companies that came last Friday and talked about the skills they want the students to have. And they did have the AI skills, the communication skills, the whole idea that they need to be able to work in a digital way. They need to collaborate. They need to communicate across cultures. And, sometimes it's about diversity within the US. Sometimes it's about intercultural. And we're talking globally, working in teams, working across time zones. So virtual exchange gives the students the practice that exactly fits with these areas. So it's not just course contents, and this is why it elevates our courses to a more practical way. They develop employability skills, praxis, in an applied way. And one of the things when you do something, you remember. I do not know how much my students remember of the theories I talk to them about, okay? But one thing I remember, I know that they will remember the experience. And in many ways, virtual exchange helps close the gap between the classroom learning, what we teach, theory, and so on, and the workplace expectations. So it gives students the experience with these kinds of collaborations that are now pretty common. Even people that work within the US only work in virtual teams. Okay, so nevertheless, when we talk about international, so it's about global projects, it's about digital mediated work, it's basically getting specific skills and tools to hit the ground run. So when we talk about career preparedness, virtual exchange is not just an add-on. It can be very practical. And in the age of AI, what we call soft skills, but we want them to learn empathy and so on, they become even more and more important, which we also call them human skills. With everything automated, who are the people that are going to create a good work environment? And therefore, these skills are even more important, and they get to experience and explore them in virtual exchange. So I'm going to move the baton to Sarah now, and the stage is yours.
Great. If you could go a few more slides, Hope. Yes. Well, thank you to my colleagues, and thank you everybody for being here. I think we've talked about some different theories that can inform our thinking about COIL or virtual exchange. Mona has given us some concrete examples of how we can integrate virtual exchange and COIL into a variety of different disciplines. And just wanted to talk a little bit more about some specific recommendations that could help you create brave spaces in your own work. So could we go to the next slide? Thank you. So I would say that two key parts of COIL and two key parts of teaching for me are planning and being flexible. So knowing that we plan and then it's not necessarily going to work. So as I expect many of you have experience with COIL, and it really needs to start with the different facilitators or faculty members. But then I think it needs to move beyond that. So the faculty members need to think about the norms that they are going to set and how they're going to encourage students to set norms within their classrooms. Doing that, they need to think about the different institutions that they're coming from. So Mona was just mentioning that some of her students probably haven't had the opportunity to meet and talk with people from other parts of the world. So what will that be like for them? Part of what we need to do in creating a space where everybody does feel comfortable and is able to express themselves is to think about the language that we use. So to make sure that the materials and the terms that we're using are accessible to everybody who's in the class. And that's not always possible, but to be aware of when something isn't. I was talking to some students the other day about an example of in the United States, if you go to higher education after high school, you are an undergraduate. But if you are in Brazil and you go to higher education after high school, it's graduação. So it sounds like graduate. And then for graduate in the United States is pós-graduação in Brazil. So these are just little things, but you can have people missing. Are you an undergraduate? Yeah, no, I'm a graduate. What? So these types of things, just trying to anticipate them and trying to pick up on them when there's miscommunication can really make a very big difference in creating a space where people are understanding one another. I think it was Dawn who talked about setting up classroom or collaboration norms. And there's a really interesting piece that Betsy shared that's on the Padlet about some of the pros and cons of doing that. That it can be exciting and important to get students involved in conversations about the norms for the classroom. But as we talked about, we're talking about different thought worlds, different ways of interacting. And so as facilitators, it's important for us to remember that not everybody has the same power within the spaces where we work. There's some ways of communicating that might be privileged, and we need to make sure that those who do not have that power, do not have that privilege, also have a say within the spaces that we are establishing. So the idea of doing a contract can be a really powerful one, but again, I would encourage you, or I think we would encourage you to include the students and really think about defining the terms that we're using. So as we're talking about, like, what does it mean to agree to disagree? If you say you're not going to interrupt, does that mean that you are negating the communication style or the expectations of some of the people who are participating in your conversations? Something else just to keep in the back of your mind is you've got these rules. What if people don't follow them? What are you going to do about that? So just something to think about. Could we go to the next slide, please? So some of the overall strategies that we would encourage you, and I'm speaking on behalf of my colleagues, I hope that's okay, is to really seek to create brave collaborative spaces. And I would say anywhere in your COIL collaborations, when you're planning a webinar with colleagues who you've never met in person, when you're in your faculty meetings, create spaces where real dialogue can happen if possible. Also, encourage and engage in risk-taking. It's important for us as instructors, as COIL coordinators, to model the kinds of actions that we want our students to engage in. If we're playing it safe all the time, if we don't ask questions and we don't create spaces where we don't know, where we're vulnerable, then how are the students going to step forward or the participants step forward and engage themselves? I'll give you an example. I put together a virtual exchange a number of years ago, and it was not very successful as far as I was concerned. And I talked to the participants about that throughout the virtual exchange. As I said, I teach teachers, so we were talking about what might not be working. And I even, wrote a chapter about, well, what did I learn from this experience and how can I do things differently in the future? Something else I would say is part of virtual exchange is the opportunity to engage with people who are different than we are. And I often say that what I'd like students to come out with is people are different. Isn't that great? That difference is an asset. It's not something that needs to keep us apart. Could we see the next slide, please? Hope. Thank you so much. So just a final idea is that you've probably heard these metaphors that virtual exchange or any kind of thinking about culture can create a window that allows us to see other perspectives, other ways of doing things, and can also create a mirror for us, can give us a chance to reflect on our own position and our own culture. And I think the virtual exchange is a wonderful opportunity for both of those things. So we would encourage you to actively work with your students to develop their cultural intelligence, their cultural humility. Particularly, I would say, if you're working with people who are in the United States, who are engaging in COIL in English, because that is the lingua franca of many COIL projects, which gives an advantage to some of the students. I think that's important for us to remember. To be careful to avoid a single story and say, oh yeah, Americans are like that. People from Romania are like that. We need to move beyond that. And also to think about Crenshaw's idea of intersectionality. In my own work, I've really been thinking a lot about, well, what does that mean, culture? Does that mean I'm from a particular country or a particular area? Or that, am I talking about sexuality? Am I talking about gender? Am I talking about socioeconomic status? Well, I think it's all of those things. And so we need to create spaces where students feel safe, bringing all of those identities, all of those different cultures into the space where they're interacting with one another. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to give you some homework, everybody. Now it's up to you to start thinking. So how are you going to establish these brave spaces? And I hope you'll tell us about that now. How are you going to do that with your colleagues? How are you going to do it with your students? How are you going to model risk taking? What are some things I will say my own experience? I've been teaching a course this semester on how to use technology in teaching. It's been kicking my butt because it's hard and it changes so fast. And so I've really talked to the students about, I don't know all of this stuff. You know, I'm a language teacher, but I'm trying to figure this out with you. And finally, how can we frame things that don't go well as teachable moments? And again, be humble ourselves and encourage the students to say, well, that didn't work. What do you think? What happened? How could we do it differently? And I think those, just to circle back to what Mona said, those are important career readiness skills to be able to figure out if something doesn't go the way you'd hoped it would go, what do you do next? So Dawn, bring us home.
Wow, every time I hear this material, I always just feel so inspired over and over again. I am about ready to start a project with students from the US, Kosovo, and the Republic of Korea. And so, like, my brain is constantly, like, figuring out how to even navigate some of this asynchronously because of the time zones. So, I just love hearing this over and over again. I'll just be watching this video over and over again. So, one of the things that we put together for you is a resource guide. It has the link to the Padlet, all the materials that we referenced, looked at, have inspired us, our contact info. So, I just dropped that link also in the chat. And our final closing slide is reach out to us. We have this wonderful quote, and I love it. Differences simply act as a yarn of curiosity, unraveling until we get to the other side. And that yarn will take me from one side to the other side, even to another part that I haven't even explored. And I want to quote Sarah again. So much of a virtual exchange, I love when she said it's both a window and a mirror, because through it, we do get a chance to reflect on how we even came to understand what bravery means in communication. And part of that is just unpacking ourselves, unpacking who we are as faculty when we walk into it. So I want to thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to put our contact information inside the chat. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, our amazing host, Hope. Thank you.
Wow, 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 wow. Let's see. What are there any other slides? Oh, just up and coming. But wow, thank you all so much. There's so much interest of what you've done. Everybody wants the slides. I kind of felt like this felt like such a warm, loving hug, and just all these great, great tools and suggestions to really go in there and tune up your coil to really be much more conscious of what you're doing. I would love to hear from people in the community who has questions. One question I have that came up early on, I think when Betsy was talking, there was a slide about it was oh, the Ubuntu stuff was amazing, amazing, amazing. But there was a slide about where was it? It was about assessment, and I just was like, oh my God, how would we do this with assessment? So I just wondered if you could help us with that one. And I also want to put a plug in for this whole wonderful, someone was talking or noting the designing backwards with the instructional design approach, and just such a sensitive, thoughtful way that you all were thinking about that. So I just super round of applause. If everybody can just unmute and give a big round of applause to our people. Yay. Um, and at the end we'll take a picture. So assessing, how in the world would you assess this? And I see that
Well,
there's some unmuted of the group. Yeah, go
I
Betsy.
would say before we even get to that assessment piece, we had a comment in the chat about uh, how one of the people was using Ubuntu as a COIL platform. And I maybe we can have that sharing happen first. That might also include a little bit about how assessment has already been utilized by that instructor. And then we can maybe jump back into other ways we would do assessment. But I would love to open this up. And I'm not sure.
Is it Cifacor?
Yes, there you go.
Yes.
Difficult. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's me. So I hope if you can give me access, I can show exactly what I do in my class. I introduce Ubuntu to my student from day one. It's actually in my syllabus. I build every discussion around Ubuntu framework and the UDL framework, which is an intentional planning for me. As a practical example of Ubuntu, as I put in the thing, I use those together. So I use UDL framework and Ubuntu to start every conversation in my class. UDL because I'm a person with physical disability and invisible disability myself. So I know how I can incorporate or integrate this in my teaching so that every student will be, I will meet every student at their needs. That's one. Ubuntu because the US system is built in with the individualistic ideologies, and the culture that I'm coming from is built around community interconnectedness. And that is what we do practically. So for instance, what assessment or what I do before we get to assessment is the class starts with everything with this Ubuntu. So for instance, do I have access? So as I can, yeah. So for instance, this is a place that for the first 3 weeks, they go the American way. And then I have Ubuntu Family Connection, which is we are starting that discussion for the first 3 weeks. I let them just connect on the. I always teach all my courses are online asynchronous, so everything we have intentionally built around when you are doing discussion, reflection, what is the piece from Ubuntu for you? And when I go to my any class that I have, I either have readings for them that to have, maybe I'll just open any reading platform, that to have instructions around readings as in reading, and also videos as in interviews, as in things that they can connect to. And I bring the American context and the other countries, and some of them I do interviews myself to add to those readings so that they can connect to the practicality of interconnectedness. So for instance, when you give assignment or reflection or discussion, let's say discussion here, or yeah, discussion which everybody does here, simply like they go online and just make comments on the platform. And no, I don't do that. I bring the Ubuntu concept. Somebody will talk about how they're connected with this particular discussion the person puts. So everybody will make at least 2 comments on their friends based on what their friends are saying, and it's not about what you think alone. How does this affect you as a neighbor? And how do you communally out with a strategy together. That's leading us to the end result of the class, which actually is a place that at times they end up doing something together, even though they are not even meeting, but because they start the conversation from the beginning of the class. And I tell them that the end will be a project. So, another thing is where we give example of group meeting or we divide them into groups. That group that we have, you know how our American system, you can be in your room and somebody will send you the I use the tree, like the branches, the trunk, and the roots. Somebody will say, I'm doing the introduction. Somebody will say, no, in my class, because of the Ubuntu, every discussion in this group must be discussed together. So I have something called, I don't want to see your blood. I want to see the unique blood of the collection of everyone, like not anybody telling me that this is what I did on this topic. So everybody comes to one agreement on that topic and they all write the same thing for me to be able to understand that there is a discussion going on collectively. It's not that somebody has done this project and only one person did the branches and one person focused on the trunk of the tree and one person focused on the root of it. No. And you can see that what the root is talking about, the trunk doesn't actually know what it is. They all did it separately. So intentionally, I debunked that in my class. And I can tell you, it's one thing that I see always recurring, that this is a new thing they are learning about working together, even though they haven't met. So at some point, I group them in sections in my class to have a time for themselves asynchronously, that they have to go into groups and have that discussion going on practically, not because of anything, but because I want to see the discussion going on every single day. Like for the first three,
Sufficor, we
yeah.
need to give other people a chance to talk. It's
Okay.
wonderful what you have,
Thank you.
and we actually are going to have you be a community webinar speaker in the fall, which is going to be wonderful. And maybe if we have time after the 1 o'clock hour, we can have some more talking. I'm really sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah,
if
thank you.
we
So
can,
this is how I just group them from the beginning, from fourth week, Ubuntu family start. I just want to highlight that. Thank you, Hope.
Thank
okay,
you.
great. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for sharing that. That's a really great example of infusing this ideology, this way of seeing teaching and learning throughout a course, not having it be accidental or just something we do the first day and forget, but that it's infused from beginning to end. And I think that consistency really, really affects the learning environment. So thank you for that great example.
Yeah. And back to what you were saying, Hope, I think
What
that
other questions or sharings might
oh.
people want to offer right now?
I think Dr. Atapato was going to share about work integrated learning.
Hi there. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
we can.
Yeah, I'm like, what we try to do in Manchester Met, like, we try to embed work integrated learning is one of the faculty priority. So when we do with the COILs, like we try to embed it like a live client, and then it can classify it as work integrated learning. Or plus we try to take, like when we use like, such as data, we try to get it from an industrial data set, where those data set like such as STR or any other data set which we can use it for work integrated, same concept. So which is you tick two boxes at the same time. So that is quite encouraged with every program. So you have the cultural component plus work integrated component as well. So it's more like industry embedded COILs with a live client brief, or it can be like using like Minecraft for learning, which is Minecraft is again industrial product as well. And working with Avatar or virtual reality content creation, kind of more like tech-oriented COIL. Plus, we are using like Bloomberg data as well. So, which is more like we try to embed it as a work integrated learning approaches as well. So, yeah, thank you.
Mm. So actually, CJ, with that, and also Mona, both of you are talking about the connection to the industry and employers. And I just wondered, um, are you prepping the employers or the industry folks to what COIL is, educating them when they come to campus? Mona, you mentioned all of these employers coming to your campus and the skills that your students are getting from doing COIL, but I'm noticing often that students are not making the connection to from the skills that they're learning in COIL to then sharing those wonderful skills with future employers. And so I just wondered, how are you bridging the gap um, with that?
Well, I spell it out. Basically telling them, okay, teamwork, this is a skill that you need at work. The whole idea of I break it down for them, what they can put on LinkedIn from these skills. Leadership, someone in your team will kind of rise, emergent leadership, and will be providing the guidance, the instructions, and all of that, because someone has to say, well, who is going to do what, how do we divide things, and so on. The other thing is one of the employers that came, actually, we worked with them. We took their company as a project and we worked, and I do include quite a few companies because again, I teach business. So for them, it's a natural, okay, in terms of strategy and so on. So these are some of the things that I do. And the students then really get it when they talk to the employers. Okay, so they see I focus again. I come from industry. I've worked in the business world, international business world for most of my life. I just joined academia quite recently. Okay, so I make sure they understand that because otherwise they don't understand why the heck they need to learn about humility. It's the business world, finance, okay, accountants, okay, engineers.
Okay.
Mhm.
There was another question in the chat.
Yes, Annette had a great question. Annette, would you like to speak your question so that we understand? I'm really intrigued because I think I'm thinking the same thing right now.
Sure, thank you. I remember when one of our newer COIL professors invited one of our more experienced COIL professors and myself to come and visit the class. And we had given them this reading beforehand on traveling to Japan for business and making lots of mistakes. And we didn't really go very far in terms of like targeting team behaviors, but I was especially inspired by what you were all talking about, thinking, well, how could we kind of like do some low stakes but brave team exercises at the start and provide it to all of our faculty. So, and work on it together with COIL's former COIL students, COIL alumni, right, and the COIL faculty and myself. So, and then tweak if they want.
Mm. Well, one thing I would say, Annette, is I like what you were saying about put the former COIL students and making them the experts. And I think that is the first step in creating a brave space, is modeling for the instructors that they have a lot to learn from other people. They're not always going to be the experts in the room. So that would be a way of starting and just putting them in, again, in that position where they need to be vulnerable and they need to ask questions. And that would be a start, I would say.
I would add to that, Annette, and then I'm sorry, Jason, did you also want to reply to Annette's question or did you have something else that you
I was
wanted
going to
to?
respond. I could wait till you're finished.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I share what Sarah commented, and one thing I've done specifically in any professional development that I do is I try to model as much as possible. So icebreakers, technology, whatever, and then the faculty are the ones who are the students. And so now they've got that student feel. They have the vulnerability of trying to figure out a new technology quickly, trying to figure out who's going to speak up first. And I think that's a way of putting them in a position to empathize, but also better understand how much support their students would need if they were engaging in similar types of activities with Zoom or with any technology, or if just setting up teams and groups. It just takes more time, and you see it differently when you're on the other side.
Good.
I would echo that as well. These are some of the techniques that I also use when I'm training and onboarding, whether it's staff, faculty, instructors, mentors, to sort of put them on the other side so they can kind of, see where they might stumble. Right now, the one project I'm working on is all about AI. I am in no way an AI expert, but they all are. It's nice to have this moment where we're going through something together, because then we can start to see that we also have something else to bring to the situation besides their AI expertise or anyone's expertise, but that we're all coming together like the Ubuntu family, we're trying to start together on the ground and then build something. Because I always think of it that at the end of the day, that's also my team in order to support the students. So if there is a problem or if there is something, if I'm building a trust relationship with them, it's going to, I feel, make it more easy for them to come forward and say, hey, I am having this situation, and then maybe we can problem solve together. Sorry, my cat bites me whenever I get excited and talking. I don't know what that's all about. She's
Well,
jealous, I guess. But thank you,
well,
Jason.
I unfortunately have to cut this. Thank you all so much. This was such a great presentation. I knew it would be. You guys are all such incredible experts and aficionados in this field, and it's really a pleasure to have you here today. And if everybody would show us your face, we could take a picture with everybody. And I need to run off to run a workshop. So yes, there you are, CJ. Great. And if anybody else wants to join us, I'll take a picture. And if you could give me a wave or a smile. And thank you so much, everybody, for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you. Thank you. And if everybody could unmute and thank our speakers in your mother tongue. Arrivederci. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Vielen Dank. Tschüss. Adios.
All right. Take care. All right.
Obrigada. Ciao.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Hope.
Bye-bye. Thank you so